Hi, Zizaran here with another video for the upcoming 325 League, and this is going to be a video with tips and tricks for the upcoming league start, covering a lot of tips for both new players and veterans. There are some changes as well for returning players, so in this video we're going to go through all of those. To start with, there's a big shift in spells versus melee. Now, generally in Path of Exile, spells were so much stronger, especially to start with, because they would scale so heavy per level, and you would get roughly a 15 to 20% damage boost just by leveling up the gem. This would be particularly strong because if you are then over leveling, you're getting a large amount of damage, whereas melee was only getting big damage upgrades by upgrading their weapons and not getting a large bonus with actual leveling the gem. This is changing with spells being nerfed, getting their scaling at a lower level, like kind of chopped a little bit. I guess if anything, they'll be stronger per level up, but they do start a little bit weaker early. A lot of the skills went from maybe full damage efficiency scaling to a lot less. So they've got nerfed a little bit, so spells will probably be a little bit worse for starting out. That being said, they do still have that system of you do gain a lot of damage per level. So, especially if you don't understand gear, spells are really good for that. Now, as I said, melee weapons and stuff like that, they will need to be good for your skill to be good and to feel great. So keep that in mind when picking a build. And a really big thing for this upcoming patch is endurance charges is king. The majority of our guides have some form of endurance charges. So if a build doesn't, hopefully it knows what it's doing. Now, as for where to find build guides, there are a lot of good guide sites, like for example Maxroll, and there will be good builds on there. And there are a lot of content creators. I specialize in very handholdy build guides for new players, and we sometimes dumb down builds on purpose, make them slightly less optimal, but a lot easier for a new player. So there are some choices of where to get build guides. Also, with my build guides, we'll always be able to help you fix any problem that arises. Now, I do want to mention some third-party tools real quick that are really important, but I will have a separate video going in-depth with all the third-party tools. The Wikipedia. If you Google Path of Exile and Axis or PoE Axis and stuff, the fandom wiki will be the first thing. That's because they pay for better search engine optimization. This has not been updated in years. There are a ton of misinformation. It is not endorsed nor updated by running your game, so don't use the fandom wiki. It is very bad. What you should still do instead when searching is you can search for PoE wiki, and then what you need, and then the PoE wiki that is powered by GGG will come up. So this is the official one. PoEDB is a database that will have pretty much all information. Everything's data mined. It's really well done. It's really well maintained. Pretty much every advanced player uses this, and you can see like modifiers on weapons, pretty much anything you want. It will take some time to navigate. That's why we'll have a separate video for it, but it's a very good resource. PoE Exchange, if you're doing bulk trading and stuff, now obviously a lot of this will be mitigated by the auction house, but PoE Exchange, really good for bulk trading, and especially buying like package deals that you might not be able to do on the auction house. And last, but certainly not least, in fact, this might be my favorite, Path of Exile is an insanely good resource. It basically simulates crafting as if you were doing it in-game with the odds and stuff like that. So you can actually try to play around with crafting and try to learn without actually using Divine Herbs or Chaos. So extremely good. You can do simulations and you can just play around with straight up currency. Now, we do have vendor recipes, and the Wikipedia actually has a vendor recipe thing. So you can search PoE Wiki vendor recipes and look through them. There are a lot of good ones. Like you can even make uniques, like Hyri's Bite, for example. Now, I do want to highlight some recipes because they are incredibly good, especially at League Start. So let's take a look at that. So there are several good ones. So the melee weapon, or rather the physical recipe, uses a rustic sash. It uses a weapon, and the rarity of the weapon doesn't matter, and you need a whetstone. Now, the rarity of the sash matters, because if it is white, it does not do anything, and if it is blue, it will be slightly worse, and if it's yellow or rare, it'll go all the way up to 64%. So this is a really good thing to use bad essences on. Let's say, for example, you have a greed early on. You don't really care about 5 to 14 life on a piece of gear. And if you use this on a weapon, it's a very big chance that it's going to get something bad. So you'll just throw this on the rustic sash instead of using an alchemy. Because if I throw this here, it's very unlikely that I'm going to get high percentage physical damage. However, if you have a contempt early, that is pretty usable because if that hits percentage fizz, you have a banger weapon. If you're not familiar with weapon crafting, having both flat physical and percentage physical early on, so good. Now, there is a similar recipe for spell damage, and that is with a chain belt. Same thing, if it's rare, it will be better than if it's blue. So, you can do it with blue, but definitely keep on to blacksmith whetstones early on. Another recipe that might be useful is in a pinch, if you don't have any movement speed, you can do a augment, quicksilver, anything, and boots. Now, if you keep doing this recipe, it'll upgrade 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. So you can keep upgrading your boots like that. And even if they're just blue, that is a prefix, you can still craft resist on it. So that is very nice. You're basically forcing yourself to get resist boots. Speaking of resists, if you go to your hideout, something that is incredibly useful is just the knowledge that you can craft resist on white gear. So for one transmute, I got 20% resist on my boots, so all I focus on early on is socket pressure. I do not really care about the getting like, 6 cold res on here and then nothing else. So 20 cold res on your gear, really, really good early. Now, there are some jewelry recipes as well, and remember that an iron ring can be turned into a ruby, a sapphire, or a topaz ring in a pinch. And this is a good thing to know, because if you find a influenced iron ring later, if you do this recipe, it does keep the influence. So if this was Warlord, the topaz ring would be Warlord too. So that is quite cool. And another recipe is, if you sell a red gem, a blue gem, and a green gem, and an amulet, it'll turn it into a white onyx amulet. Now, a decent thing here is that this is basically infinite scours. So now I can alchemy this or throw an essence. Like, I might have a lot of like low-level bad essences, and then I can just keep doing this over and over again so I don't have to use scours. I actually quite often will use this on League Start just to try to get an okay amulet early. So keep that in mind, definitely useful. Now, this does always make it a white onyx amulet. You can't turn it into a turquoise or something, and you can't keep it as like a gate amulet or something. Now, another thing worth mentioning is leveling areas in the campaign. And I'd say each act has like a decent place, like Ledge, both Northern Forest and Western Forest. But there are just a few places that we regularly do level and over level in the campaign. Especially on softcore, you should only need to do it in these two areas. But even on hardcore, we pretty much only level in those areas. Docks is really good in Act 3. Act 4 doesn't really have one. Combe Stronghold is the least worst. Once you get to Act 5, this is the main leveling area, and very often you will see players go all the way to 48. Sometimes in harder races and on hardcore, people can go to 50 to 52 here. And the reason for that is that in the next areas, all the way to Act 7, it's not that good to farm. And this zone is just insane. There's blue monsters everywhere, and it's so nice to get really geared up before Innocence and before Kitava. I usually go to 45, 46 here, but you can go further. Act 6, so Prisoner's Gate is decent here. Ashton Fields and Northern in Act 7. Act 8, Harbor Bridge is another really, really good farming place. It depends a little bit on league mechanics and stuff like that, but Act 8, Harbor Bridge can be really nice to farm, as well as Blood Aqueduct in Act 9. This is one of the main places people get level 70 before maps, because getting that makes that the Belly of the Beast, becomes a lot easier. And Belly of the Beast boss can be really tricky, especially on hardcore. You're under geared, maybe you're not even rest capped, you're struggling. Farming here in Blood Aqueduct can be really nice. Act 10, Desecrated Chambers, similar to Act 5-1, but then you have already killed the Act 9 boss, and Act 10 is quite easy compared to Act 9. Another thing that's really important for the new league is setting up your tabs beforehand. So what league are you going to play, and where do you need to set up tabs? So if I'm going to play hardcore trade in 325, I need to just do the normal hardcore league. Whereas if I'm playing hardcore solo self-found, then I need to go to regular hardcore solo self-found and set up the tabs there, because it takes it from the parent league. Now, I know there's been some issues with private leagues in this before. I believe maybe it's fixed already, but I believe there's an issue with not setting. If you make the private league before the parent league exists, it'll just make all your tabs in no folders and stuff. And I do have videos about how I set mine up, but I'm very happy with my usage of like folders and tabs and setting everything up. I try to have like short names on everything, so this list doesn't go out to here. And it's pretty easy for me to search through. Next, I want to start covering some map tricks and what I do at the start of the league, because usually it takes me less than a day to fill out most of my atlas, and I want to show how to accomplish that. So first off, Kirax sells maps, and you can hold Alt to see what is completed, whether it's just the map itself or the bonus. To just complete a map and make it droppable, you just need to kill it, regardless of a red map being rare, etc., or uncorrupted. Just to make it droppable, you just need to kill it. So keep that in mind as well. But either way, holding Alt down on that will give you lots of information. Now, when does Kirak reset the maps he sells? So if you look now, we have one red map for sale. And if I open any of these maps, I don't even need to look at what the mission is or anything like that. Now you can see that he's selling a bunch of new maps. So it's every time he opens a mission, he is going to reset that. And this is very good. I use this especially to break into 5 to 8s and stuff like that. Maybe even for a few of my tier 2s and 3s early. But chance orbs are quite precious early. I don't use them for anything else than this. But yeah, very, very good for that. Now, next I want to show another really good map tip. And that is 3-to-1ing. So obviously the specific atlas that you're looking at now is going to be changed. But the important part here is I have no whatstones in. So all the maps you're seeing right now is their natural tier. And that is really important, because that is important for this. Because what I'm about to show you, like for example, like now I could drop a cemetery as a tier 11, right? So that'll change things. But if we look right now, cemetery is tier 4, and you can see that it is connected to both gardens and cage as a tier 5 map. So some returning players might think those are one of the maps that I will be getting. However, I can actually get any map a tier above. So now I got a siege, now I got a courtyard, now I got a gardens, now I got a siege, and I think I've switched with every combination I possibly can here. However, that was only trying with those two. What if I'm now trying with these two? And I'm trying this one. Courtyard, burial chambers now, Atoll, Phantasmagoria. So through, I think it's 7 maps you need, you can hit at least one that you want above. So I can now hit every single tier 5 by a different mix and match. And the way this works is that maps are different to currency. They all have their own unique database ID, right? They are their own item. Like if I'm switching these two, this is that map, right? Whereas currency, hopefully this makes sense, but currency doesn't have a unique item identifier. Now, think of this a little bit as like potion mix matching. Depending on that item ID, which isn't something we can see, but we can mix around with different ones and get a map of the tier above. So the TLDR is if you have at least 7 of one map, you can, by mix and matching different ones, hit one that is 1 tier above. So let's say that I didn't have graveyard. With these 9, 1 of these or 3 of these will sell for a graveyard, but I'll have to play around with the combination. Now, there is another thing that I want to talk about that I have not talked about before in tips and tricks videos. And honestly, for a lot of people, this advice comes too late from me to actually help them, and that is isolating maps on the atlas. Now, if you're already familiar with Path of Exile, you know that if I'm trying to farm a siege map, then I want to be in Canyon or Cells, right, at the start of a league. Because if this is never being completed and I'm killing waterways, then siege simply cannot drop. But we can actually use this to our advantage. So let's say none of these maps were filled in, right? And it is easier than ever in the new patch to see what divination cards drop where. You'll just be able to hover over and it'll tell you that in Siege it drops, for example, the Shaper Scepter and stuff like that. Gardens drops Porcupine. So let's use Gardens as an example. And then I already know now that I really want to farm Gardens for the Porcupine card. I'm going to play a bow build and I want a 6-link bow. Now I look at what's near Gardens, right? Is there anything else good that I want a divination card from? Well, not really, right? Our Lake is kind of whatever, and Cemetery is okay. I'll farm that so I have a chance to get some divines. So now, what I then do with my newfound knowledge is I do not complete any other tier 4 and other tier 5. Now, why do I do this? And this is why it's something you can fuck up, because we cannot uncomplete maps on the Atlas. That sucks. It's just the reality of things. So this is basically permanently bricking your Atlas if you don't know about this. Now, this is something I only do temporarily at the start of a league to farm a specific div card good for my build, specifically the Porcupine. Other builds do it with like chains that bind and stuff like that, but getting a 6th in the first 10 hours of a league is really nice. So now that I've completed the gardens and I've completed cemetery, those are the only tier 4s and tier 5s that can drop. Now the next thing I do is I work on climbing into yellows to I start, getting my bonus and evolving my Atlas skill tree, right? And I particularly focus on things that add monsters to my map. So maybe that's shrines, maybe that's strong boxes, harbingers, breach, anything that adds a lot of monsters to the map is really good. And I could also have divination cards from strongboxes or duplicated and do strongboxes. That is a really nice thing to do early on. Now, every time I'm doing a map that isn't connected to a tier 5, it is going to drop gardens. Because Waste Pool, the only tier 5 I can drop here is gardens, because it is not connected to Burial Chamber. Now, if I'm in a tier 6, it can drop Burial Chamber. But if I'm doing, when I'm doing my yellow map completion, I end up getting 20 to 40 of these. And I also get a lot of these. So it is a really, really nice thing. And I end up just leveling up and completing my Atlas. And I do lose out on a lot of points. But the main thing that stops me from farming a divination card early on is simply that, well, okay, I only have 1 gardens. I'm not going to get a full porcupines card from 1 gardens. And farming the campaign is not very good from drop rates. So hopefully that makes sense on how to isolate maps. You simply just do not complete any other maps of that tier. I usually farm 1 set of the div card and then I complete everything. And the future characters will be in a more alive economy anyway. But at the first 10 hours of League Start, it might be really hard to get. Now, how do you get rich in Path of Exile? This is not going to be a large section about how to make currency, but the number one thing I would tell you to do is to specialize in one thing. Find something that you enjoy, and honestly, there's very few wrong answers here, oh, that's bad. If you enjoy Sanctum and you start focusing on Sanctum, buying that off other people and just spam running it, you are going to make a lot of money. Do you like essences and you're focusing on doing tier 6 maps and spam running them very fast and selling them to other people? You're going to make a lot of money. Do you like Blight and you just want to focus on that? Buy that from other people. And honestly, this goes for nearly everything. Heists as well. If you just focus on one mechanic, become really good and people will buy more in bulk as well. There's just so many wins here in focusing on one mechanic and specializing. So, and you'll find yourself becoming more efficient and using your time better as well. Whereas every time the people I know that are the poorest every league, they're the ones that are just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Steel Mage left my guild. All the people that are poor are generally the ones that are just playing the game with no set plan. And if that works for you, there is no wrong way to play a game other than to not have fun. But if you want some tips for being rich, specialize. Another thing that's really good for making money, especially in really early, is if you are a player that's a little bit on the faster side. Some people are flipping their keyboard now and thinking I take 20 hours through the campaign. Fuck me. But if you are getting a little bit early to maps, if you are getting a little bit early to tier 16s, selling high item level bases, especially on hardcore, it literally churns out money. It's 10 to 20 chaos per base, and you will find 5 to 10 bases per map. And the maps themselves can be 20 to 40 C early on. So you can get an insane amount of currency the first 10 hours. Now, another thing that's an easy mistake to do, and I've done this myself, is assuming that something has the same price as last league. For example, there are some leagues where Badge of the Brotherhood have been multiple divines, and there are some where it has been 3 chaos. Same with simple items like Fury Valve, and there are quite a lot of items. So erring a little bit on the side of caution and looking up items that you at least know are usable is a really, really surprisingly good advice, because price changes a lot by the meta. This is particularly important because there are some items that are really cheap because they aren't being used, but the item itself is quite rare. So when an item is actually used a lot, it is going to be expensive. For example, Aziri's Foible is really common, but because last league it was one of the most popular builds, it was 6 divine on hardcore. I ended up finding 30 or 40 and they sold like hotcakes. Another thing that's not to be slept on, especially because they're getting buffed this league, and we will be finding some of those beasts that are from the Einhar missions specifically. They will actually be rare beasts now, some of them. We don't know which ones, I think, but we are getting a buff to beasts. Either way, there's quite a lot of decent ones early. The unique ones can be really good to do, as well as you have... I don't know if we know how we get the Black Morrigan now, but that's going to be one to look out for. Obviously, you have the very special ones. But Beast in general is really good. especially for like even just maps and stuff. Imprint Beast, Split Beast, very good. Now, hopefully Neversink will do this for most of you, but having 30% quality bases showing on your filter, I believe that's the only way to get 30% quality on a base now, but 30% bases will be selling probably for quite a lot now. And remember that there are new base types in the game as well, so you will be using those eventually. Either way, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed all the tips and tricks. Let me know if there was something you found particularly useful, or something that was badly explained and I can explain it better in the future, because I usually want to do one of these per league. Also, feel free to share really good tips that I didn't mention in the comments down below, and people might get some really good gems. Either way, thanks for watching. I will also be streaming on YouTube and Twitch this league start, so thanks. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.